Almost everyone assumes that a spiritual teaching is supposed to tell you the truth, but the Lotus Sutra suggests something much stranger. Sometimes a teaching can be deliberately provisional and still lead you towards the truth. The idea is called upāya, a skilful means, and it raises a fascinating question. If Buddhism can treat its own teachings as useful models rather than final descriptions of reality, how different is that from what science does? Today we'll explore the Lotus Sutra, the one vehicle, its extraordinary parables, and why a Buddhist text written nearly 2,000 years ago has a surprisingly modern message about models, consciousness and reality. Physics, Consciousness and Reality, Dicky and Nigel Adams. This is part 59 in the video series. We're on chapter 9, Relational Reality and Systems Thinking. And I apologise in advance as there are quite a few long Pali and probably Sanskrit names in this in the Lotus Sutra. So I apologise in advance for my pronunciation. Bear with me. It's the story, not the names or the way I say the words. So, part 56 in the book, the Lotus Sutra. If the Heart Sutra distills Buddhist wisdom to a razor-sharp formula, the Lotus Sutra expands it into an epic vision. Known in Sanskrit as the Siddhartha Pandanka Sutra, the Sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Dharma, it was composed in India between the 1st and 2nd century CE and later translated into Chinese by Kamayarajiya in 406 CE, a version that became the foundation of its influence across East Asia. The Lotus Sutra is a text of scope and grandeur. Where the Heart Sutra strips away, the Lotus Sutra layers on. Cosmic imagery, vast assemblies of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and a promise that the enlightenment is not just available to all beings, but their essential nature, is one of the most loved and recited scriptures in Mahayana Buddhism, central to Tiantai in China, Tendai in Japan, and more recently the Nichiren tradition, which distilled its Chinese title into the mantra Nam Myoye Renge Koi, and regards chanting it to be the sole vehicle of liberation in the so-called terrible age of Mapol. At its heart, the Lotus Sutra proclaims the universality of Buddhahood. This is the doctrine of ekayana, the one vehicle. Earlier teachings may have described three vehicles, one for disciples, one for solitary Buddhas, and one for Bodhisattvas. But these, the Lotus Sutra insists, were skillful means. They were provisional, adapted to the capacities of different listeners. Ultimately, there is only one path, and it leads all beings, without exception, to full Buddhahood. This doctrine is illustrated with parables. Most famous is the burning house. A wealthy man's house is in flames, but his children refuse to leave because they are absorbed in play. He promises them carts of different kinds, goat carts, deer carts, ox carts, to lure them out. Once safe, he gives them magnificent ox carts surpassing all the others. The carts represent the Buddha's earlier teachings. The great cart is the one vehicle. What seems like diversity of paths is in fact a single ultimate way. Another parable is the magic city. Travellers grow weary on a long road to treasure. To encourage them, their leader conjures up a city where they can rest. When they are refreshed, the illusion vanishes, and he urges them on to the true goal. The lesson: provisional teachings are real enough to help us progress, but they are not the final truth. The Lotus Sutra also advances the vision of the Buddha himself. Rather than a historical figure who attained enlightenment at a particular time, Buddha is revealed as an eternal cosmic presence who has always been teaching and will always continue to teach. The historical Siddhartha Gautama is one manifestation of the timeless Buddha. This idea radically shifts the ground. The Dharma is not the discovery of one man, but the eternal principle of reality itself. The sutra is visionary in tone, often poetic and dreamlike. The Buddha is depicted surrounded by vast assemblies of bodhisattvas, jewels raining from the sky, the ground quaking as truths are declared. It is less philosophical argument than religious theatre, intended to inspire devotion as much as understanding. From the standpoint of this book, the Lotus Sutra matters because of what it does with illusion and truth. It acknowledges that teachings themselves can be illusions, skillful fictions crafted to lead people forward. Reality, then, is not simply what is, but what works to bring beings towards liberation. The notion of upāya, skill in means, has a surprising modern echo in science. Our theories, too, are not final truths, but models, tools that serve a purpose. Newtonian physics is not wrong, it is a provisional map, superseded but still useful. The Sutra's insistence that all beings are destined for Buddhahood also resonates with questions of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, as some physicists and philosophers suggest, then it cannot be the private property of human beings alone. The Lotus Sutra's universalism, that even the lowliest creatures are on the path to awakening, anticipates a vision where mind runs deeper and wider than we imagine. It is no accident that modern movements like Nichiren Buddhism, with the chant of Nam Myoho Rengo Koi, literally Hail to the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Dharma, have flourished outside Asia. Promise is direct. You do not need monastic training or years of study. The Dharma is already yours. Chanting the title of the sutra is participation in its transformative power in the here and now. The Lotus Sutra, in a sense, is the opposite of the Heart Sutra. Where one negates, the other affirms. Where one strips back, the other proclaims. But they belong to the same family. Both insist that truth cannot be pinned down to fixed doctrines. The Heart Sutra says all categories are empty. The Lotus Sutra says all provisional categories are just means to the one vehicle. Together they offer a Buddhism that is both analytic and visionary, philosophical and devotional. So the Lotus Sutra gives a very different route to the same territory we encountered in the Heart Sutra. Don't mistake the concepts we use to navigate reality for reality itself. If this is true, then perhaps religions, philosophies and even scientific theories can be understood as maps rather than destinations, useful because of where they take us rather than because they capture reality perfectly. That leads naturally to another central Buddhist idea. If nothing exists independently, then everything must arise through networks of causes and conditions. In the next video, we'll examine dependent origination and what more Buddhism can tell us about a reality built from relationships rather than isolated things.